Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming here to my talk today. I'm Adebisi, and I'll be speaking to you today about streamlining application developments with Ash, a real-world adoption story. So a little bit about me. I'm a software engineer at pclub.io, where we are building a skills transformation platform for revenue professionals. Think of it as Netflix, but for revenue professionals. So we get to recommend courses to our users based on identified skill gaps by our integration to the tools they use in their daily operations. So we also have an AI role play where they get to practice the skills learned from time to time. So it's not just about learning and then going into the real world. It's like a sandbox environment where they get to touch with a chat agent. Excuse me. Where they get to speak with a chat agent in our system before they go out into the real world. So, since you are here, a quick show of hands. Who here has never heard of Ash before? Wow, a couple of hands. So who here has heard of Ash but has never used it in production? Wow, almost everybody. Interesting. So who has heard of Ash and is using it in production? Okay, thank God. And who has introduced Ash into a brownfield project? Only Zach and some. Okay. So today we'll be telling you a little bit about Ash for those who don't know what Ash is, straight from the Ash website. So it's an Elixir backend framework for unparalleled productivity, declarative tools that let you stop wasting time reinventing the wheels, use with Phoenix Live View, build API in minutes. But for me, I would say Ash is a framework focused on modeling your business domain. Unlike Phoenix, which handles the web request, or Ecto, which grants you access to database. With Ash, you can define your domain logic first, and then easily layer features on top of that, like APIs, persistence, and more of that. So you might be wondering, why did we introduce Ash into our existing projects? There's a story behind it, because we are trying to streamline our development process so that we can make our code base as lean as possible. We are a small team of like 4 engineers, so we wanted to move as fast as we can because we are growing faster than we imagined would be. So we didn't just want to add in more developers, we want to push to the limits to see how far we can go with the team we have. So we started thinking about sprinkling some meta-programming into our code base, whereby for basic operations, CRUD operations, you don't have to rewrite a create function all the time. You don't have to rewrite an insert function all the time. So we did a little bit of meta programming and landed at something like this. I don't know if we can see from the back. Can we see from? Okay, thank you. So we created a create module like this, whereby we defined a call, and then we have a macro that gets injected into our context modules. So, and this is how we use them in our context module. So you just have to define your module and use the create meta, and then you pass in a schema, and you're done. So you don't have to spend time reviewing why this create is like this, because this gives us uniformity across our code base. So you might be looking at this and say, okay, this is okay, we are good to go, but then there's a little bit of a setback or drawback with this approach, because the way we built the macro requires us to have a specific change set function. So it means we can't reuse or have 2 actions that creates or writes to the database at the same time using this macro. So we needed to do something that, if you look at the macro definition here, on line 9, you'll see that it always expects the schema to have this change set function. So this is quite limiting. So we started looking at Ash because It gives us all of this and much more out of the box, so we didn't want to have to reinvent what already exists in the community. So selling this to management was quite easy because our CTO, Britain, has been a big proponent of Ash, but then the next hurdle was to get adoption from the team, get the team buying. So trying to sell this to the team, there was a little bit of friction around how will this impact my productivity, how long will it take for me to learn while I'm learning, how do I get to still deliver business value. The other friction we had was around documentation and lack of resources online, because if you do a quick search for a couple of things, you might not find so much information out there. Then the next one was around it feeling magical, because once you just define a resource, you get a lot of things for free and you're like, what's going on here? So those were one of the concerns we had. Then being logged into Ash, like once you introduce Ash to your code base, does it mean we are stuck with Ash forever? Or we have to do a big rewrite when we need to move out of Ash? Then the other thing was, as we are growing, ramping up new team members, how long will it take before I become productive in the new code base? Because finding an Elixir developer is hard enough, then finding one who knows how to do Ash is even harder. So to get around this, excuse me, we figured it was okay to go slow a little bit if it makes us go faster in the long run. So we decided that we were not going to just do a full rewrite of our app, and we were going to take it one step at a time. So for a while, it was okay to just have a mix of Ash and our regular Elixir code. Then, yeah, in terms of documentation, the Ash documentation keeps getting better over time. And the Ash core team is also quite responsive. So as long as you have a problem and you post on the Discord or ask in the Ash forum, you would almost definitely get a response. But one thing we could also do as early adopters is to make more information available to the community to drive adoption. Then the other thing around feeling like magic, coming from Rails, there was a lot of magic there, which most of it sometimes you don't understand. When things work, they are fine. But when it breaks, then you have to scratch your head. But with Ash, once you get a hang of the patterns and the conventions, you can actually guess how things would work. And you find out that it works that way because of the consistency across the ecosystem. So in terms of vendor locking, Ash provides a lot of escape hatches. So you can mix Ash with your regular Elixir. It's just an abstraction over what the things that are not your core business logic. So all the things that don't change from app to app are the things Ash is trying to abstract to allow you focus on delivering value to the business. And in terms of team ramp-up, our process is for any new team member that joins, you get an onboarding body that walks you through the code base. It's not like you just joined today and you're thrown into the middle of nowhere, go figure things out. So you have someone working with you. So that wasn't an issue. So, like all big things come from small beginnings, we decided we needed to start small. So a safe way to start was to do something in our admin panel. So that way we have a controlled environment because it's just internal to users. So if we mess things up, we can easily discard it and then it doesn't impact the business as a whole. So we decided to create this page. Normally, when you're learning something new, you try to do a to-do app, but here we are integrating into the live system. So we just wanted a page where we could list all our users, we could search through the users, and we could have some pagination. So for us to do that, we needed to create a user resource. But mind you, we already have a user schema and an account context because we also use phx.gen.auth. So we had to find a way to let the generators generate a different context for that. So we called it the Ash accounts. So that way we delineate everything that has to do with Ash from the other side of our code base. So we then created a user resource. And you might be wondering, what's a resource in Ash? So a resource is a central building block in which Ash represents a domain model. Almost everything you do in Ash starts from the resource. Because once you describe the attributes of a resource, then you can now determine how to change it using actions and other things. So a resource essentially comprises of the following: the data layer, because you don't have to decide that upfront. Ash supports a lot of persistence layer. You have Postgres, MySQL, ETS, CSV, and the likes. So then you have to determine the data structure, that's the fields and the attributes, then the relationships to other resources, then validations and constraints, then available actions. The actions are just your functions in your regular context modules that you use to perform operations on the resource. Then you could also squeeze in some authorization rules and policies with Ash and some custom logic. So that's a resource in a nutshell. So now we created a user resource that looks just like this. So we have the data layer described as Postgres here. Then the attributes, this is just a trimmed down version of what we have in our user schema. And then the identities there. So one challenge we encountered here was that with Ash, when you define a resource, Ash auto-generates, you can generate the migration for that, so you don't have to worry about running, excuse me, ecto migration generates around the code. Ash figures it out. It determines the existing states of your resource by maintaining a JSON snapshot of the fields. Then by running the generator, it figures out what new fields it needs to add, the type, and things like that. But one thing we found was Ash, at least the way we use it, it could not figure out the existing constraints we have on our users table. So that was causing a little bit of issues for us. So as with everything in Ash, there's an escape hatch. So that was setting migrates to false. So if you can see the highlighted line there, setting migration to false tells Ash, like, don't generate a migration file for this resource. You handle it manually. And that was it. So the next thing we needed to do was to define the list action. So generally in Ash, there are 4 types of actions. It's either a read, an update, a create, or a delete action. So with this now, since we're fetching data from the database, we needed a read action, and we gave it a name, and we defined the arguments. So one other thing you get for free here is the arguments are also type checked. So when you pass in the wrong arguments, you get an error for free. And then it also gives us pagination. And then we did a little bit of sorting and filtering using a preparation. So a preparation is, think of an action like a plug now. You can pass in different operations, and one operation can take the results of the previous one and then do more operations on that. So that is what is happening here. So the preparation here is taking the given query and adding a sort and a filter based on the given arguments. And this was all we needed to do to power that page. So having done this, a new requirement came in. So business is doing fine. We were trying to land a client, and one of the IT requirements was we had to be SOC compliant. So, and one of the line items there was that we should be able to lock user accounts after a number of failed login attempts. So we looked like we are feeling confident with Ash, so let's take this for a spin. But mind you, we already have phx.gen.auth in place. But then we also thought about it like, with phx.gen.auth, you don't get automatic updates if a vulnerability is discovered in the implementation. For you to fix that, you have to go in manually and fix that. Or if there's a fix using Igniter, but as of the time of preparing this talk, there is no such thing. So we thought, why not do this with AshAuthentication? So we installed AshAuthentication using Igniter. So we added a couple of packages to the code base. And then we decided on the authentication strategy. Definitely, we were already using phx.gen.auth, so with the password strategy. And in Ash, a strategy is simply a way by which you identify your users in your application. There are several strategies in Ash. The password strategy is one of them. You could use magic links, you could use OAuth, Google, GitHub, and the list is endless. So once again, we started small because this time the stakes are higher. It's user-facing, so we don't want to break things in production, especially just locking all our users out of the app. So we decided to, this is one part of the code generated by the Ash generator. So it's created the authentication block, and then the token block and the strategy. So in this case, we are using the password strategy, and this is all we needed to do for that. It also added the sign-in with password action. Remember, read actions translate into select statements, and the arguments are typed, and it also provided documentation for free. And then remember I told you that preparations are a way to enrich your queries or work on the results of your queries. So in this case now, there's a built-in sign-in preparation from the AshAuthentication package, which does the actual checking of the username and password. So, and this was all we need to do to replace the phx.gen.auth function. That's the get user by email and password, and that was it. And the surprising thing was that none of our tests broke. So it was just a drop-in replacement one for one, and we were off. So the next part now was, okay, we now have to lock the users out. So again, that wasn't available out of the box from Ash, so we needed an escape hatch. So with preparations, we were able to do that again. And now we added our own preparation. So Ash also has the concept of callbacks, whereby you can define where you want to tie into the operations. So we used the after action callback, which allows the sign-in preparation to do all it has to do. Then we get the result of that and then determine if we needed to lock the user account out or not. And the implementation was also trivial. So you notice here that we are passing the check lockout function to the after action. And this is the definition of the check lockout function. So usually the check lockout function receives 3 arguments. One is the query that was run at the beginning of the action, the results of the action so far, and the context in which the action is run. So usually the context holds some metadata about your operations from start up to the point at which this is running. But since this was user-facing, we wanted to reduce the blast radius, so we added a feature flag so that it would only apply to internal users for now. So, and I believe most people are familiar with fun with flags. Then the actual implementation goes in this slide. So here we're just doing pattern matching, checking how many times you failed, and locking based on that. So this is just normal Elixir code, again showcasing that you are not locked into the Ash way, or you have to use Ash, and if Ash doesn't support what you're trying to do, you're stuck. And yeah, so this is how normal fun with flag stuff. We just implemented the protocol because now we had two variants of user. We had the one generated by phx.gen.auth, and then we had the Ash user. So it was necessary for us to include the implementation for this as well to support fun with flags. So up to this point, it feels like everything is all beds and roses, like everything going well. But that was not the case. We had some gotchas along the way. And the first one was having conflicts with migration because we were new to using Ash. So while this was going on, some other member of the team was also building out a different feature with Ash. That was also at the admin side, so just to get a feel of things. So what happened was, with old habits, he had created the migration manually for what he was working on, but he defined it as an Ash resource. So the person reviewing the PR2 missed that, and somehow it got merged in. And the way we do trunk-based development, so anything that gets merged in goes straight into production. So that worked well, but pulling from the main branch and trying to do anything Ash now, you get an error like this field already exists in the database, and it took a while. Like this, we are just defining this. We didn't, like, you're working on a module where you're getting an error from a module that you didn't touch, and now you're wondering, where is this coming from? All our tests are agreeing what's going on. Then we found that that was the case of failing to generate the migrations using Ash. So our fix around that was to just delete the migration file that was generated and move on with life. And now we ran the code generator so that Ash has a state of the tables so far, but deleted the migration file because we know that field already existed. So, and that was it. So the next one was around the migration files that were generated. We use a tool called Excellent Migrations to check the safety of our migrations before going into the production, so that we don't have operations that would lock our database while our migrations are running and other things like that. But we found that the migrations generated by Ash don't incorporate that. It just generates the regular Ecto migrations. So that's something we are looking to submit a PR for. And the last one that was a pain, I'm sure Zach would know a way to do this, but for us, while we were implementing the lockouts, we could not access the results of the preparation, that's the sign-in preparation, when the authentication failed. We needed to know from that preparation that, okay, the password does not match, so we need to lock the user. But since we couldn't do that, we had to do the password check again. So that's a trade-off that we were comfortable, we were okay with to do because it wasn't such a big thing. So now we're getting to the end. You're probably asking yourself, are we happy with our decision to use Ash? And for us, the answer would be a resounding yes. Even though we are relatively new in our adoption, the value it has provided so far, even though we are still just scratching the surface, it's made it worth it for us. And with the announcement of AshAI, it's also tending towards the things we are looking to do because we are trying to create an immersive learning experience for our users using AIs and things like that. So it just opens a whole new world of possibilities for us. And by doing this with Ash, we can leverage the community, which I believe is fastly growing, and we don't intend to get stuck at any point because there's always an escape hatch. So, who should consider adopting Ash? I would say if you want to move fast, you should consider adopting Ash, because I've had a lot of times like Ash is only good when you are a solo developer and you need to do a lot of things. So then I ask myself, if Ash makes one person go faster, why should it slow more people down? So then what will stop you from using Ash? And should it? I would say the learning curve is the major thing I hear about, but then once everything clicks, I don't think it's just like you've got some more superpowers, so nothing should stop you. And the last one is the benefit of Ash adoption we've seen so far. I already talked about that. And would we do it again? I would say the answer is a resounding yes. So thank you, everyone. That's my thing.
Hi. Yes. Thank you so much for the talk. It was super interesting to learn about Ash. I would like to reference the last slide when you the previous slide where you had this first. No. To the most recent slide before the final one. Yeah, this one. I would like to reference this slide and maybe slightly flip the first question, because you already described that if you want to move fast, especially for small teams, it would be really nice to consider adopting Ash. But what about the different approach? What kind of team or configuration should not consider adopting Ash? When would be a wrong decision, for example? Thank you.
So I would say it depends on the team size. For our use case, we're just a team of 4 engineers, so it made sense we could get everyone around and we could all learn at the same pace. But when you have larger teams, you would have to break it down into smaller chunks, like have these people, you have to split the team is what I would recommend. Then you get some people to become champions in the organization that then assist others, but you won't just do a wholesale, like drop everything and go and learn Ash. That's the way I would approach that.